And with me today to talk more about that, we'll kind of go around in the circle here. Mayor Drew Dilkens from Windsor, Mayor Patrick Brown from Brampton, and there's Mayor Jim Diodati, from Niagara Falls. Hi to all three of you. It's good to see you. Thanks for making the time.
Thanks,
my pleasure.
Mayor Dilkens, I'll start with you. And I had read some, obviously the focus from the new incoming border czar is around this issue of human smuggling. And I had read some RCMP who are stationed in Windsor talk about the struggle that they're facing with respect to that. Tell me a bit about your experience as such a prominent border city around that issue and the rush toward the border, if there is one.
Well, I think it's fair to say we have the world's longest undefended border, which is, there's no fence, but just a series of fortified gates. And I don't anticipate much is going to change at those fortified gates, but it's hard for the United States to ignore the fact that in the last year, there's about 19,500 people that entered the United States illegally, usually through human smugglers, which was more than the past 17 years combined. And so certainly that number is going to draw attention, which is why I think you see Mr. Holman saying that they won't be able to look away from the northern border, that they're going to have to deal with what they see to be a problem.
The flip side of that, Mayor Diodati, is the possibility, because of Trump's very specific promise to engage in the largest deportation program ever on day one, that there could be a rush toward our border as well. And as someone who has spoken out about the impact of those seeking asylum and sort of the federal component and all of that, what's your level of concern at this moment around that possibility?
Well, we're still concerned. We still have thousands of asylum seekers in our city currently. 2022, we had more than 40,000 come into Canada, many through Roxham Road. We've closed that loophole, but my concern is there's 11 million illegal aliens in the United States, and we know that a lot of them are going to seek the northern border. So we're prepared. Obviously, Niagara Falls, with all of its hotel inventory, is a logical place for people to think. But unfortunately, we had more per capita than anywhere else in Canada. It was overwhelming. At 1.5% of our population were asylum seekers. So already dealing with a housing issue and affordability crisis, adding something like this, it exacerbates a current problem. So yeah, we're concerned.
Mayor Brown, I'll ask you a similar question. I know Peel Region, for example, is in the process of getting a welcome center of sorts established, but even that has faced its hurdles.
Yeah, good news is it's ready to go, thanks to support from Minister Miller. But, at one point last year, we were at 80% of our shelter system was being used by asylum claimants. And so if there is a surge in asylum claimants, that's going to cause a huge strain on our capacity to help those most in need.
So let's talk a little bit, Mayor Dilkens, about potential solutions. I mean, you raise a very valid point. This is the largest undefended border in the world. We know prior to closing that loophole that Mayor Diodati referenced, there was huge issue policing basically points in between, or rather the border in between points of entry. Is the solution more enforcement? Is there a discussion among mayors and other levels of government about what that may look like? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think enforcement has to be an essential part of the equation, but I also think we really need to make sure we're relying on the Safe Third Country Agreement that we have with the United States, where people who are seeking refugee claims in Canada wait for those claims to be adjudicated in the United States. And I've heard Mr. Holman talk about wanting to have the same agreement in Mexico. So the Safe Mexico Agreement, where those trying to penetrate the U.S. border on the south would also wait in Mexico for their cases to be heard by U.S. Customs and Border Enforcement. And so I think we need to rely on the existing legislation, but you're not going to be able to turn away and hope that written word on paper alone is going to solve the issue. We're going to have to make sure that the right enforcement tools are in place in places where it's easy to cross. And there are many places in our country where it is very easy to cross between the United States and Canada, and more attention is going to have to be placed there.
Mayor Diodati, what are your thoughts on sort of what addressing the potential issue looks like? And then also I was wondering, given the back and forth between a lot of municipalities and the federal government about kind of getting compensated for housing people who are seeking asylum, is there a better system in place now, or will it still be kind of ad hoc?
I think it's going to be ad hoc. Nobody really knows what to expect. And I agree with Mayor Dilkens. Right now we have the safe third country status, but if President Trump or President-elect Trump makes a decision to change that, we're going to have some serious issues on our hand. Already, I understand it's a 44-month delay for people dealing with immigration. If you get these kind of numbers coming into our system, I don't know how they're going to do it without massive resources. So we know, and as Mayor Dilkens said, we've got the largest unmilitarized border in the world. We've got approximately 9,000 kilometers with only 100 official crossings. There's lots of places where there's no fences, there's no gates, and there's an easy opportunity to come across. Unfortunately, we're coming into the winter, and we know the sad ending that often happens when people make that choice to cross illegal in the night during the winter time. So everything's going through my mind right now. I just know we're going to need massive resources and great communication with our neighbors to the south.
I wonder, Mayor Brown, your thoughts on the potential for those resources. I mean, I remember when you were here in Ottawa, you know what the kind of status is in the RCMP is already stretched. Basically, the CBSA, the union there says they're short 2,000 people, and then you combine that with just how big the border is. Do you think it's plausible that the level of enforcement necessary could be there?
I think we're desperately short in terms of resources for CBSA. One of the reasons we have an auto theft crisis in this country is because of the lack of resources from CBSA. You know, I want to see stricter border security also for another reason, and that's the use of illegal firearms. You know, 90% of the guns found in crime in the GTA in the last year were from south of the border. And so if we're going to have a conversation about the border and the pressures of illegal crossings, you know, the elephant in the room is that the pressure is put on public safety, the enormous influx of firearms. You know, that's a major challenge for us.
Is there, Mayor Dilkens, as we talk about this Team Canada approach to the incoming Trump administration, how Canada is going to deal with it? I remember talking to you back in the day when NAFTA was being negotiated. Like, is a similar approach being embarked on? Have you been involved in conversations about how to approach these issues, which will somewhat be similar in nature, but not entirely?
Well, I think there's a couple of things, Vassy. I think number one, the U.S. has to get control of their southern border. I think very few of the people that are waiting for IRCC to adjudicate their claims came in from the Northern Passage or were on a boat from, you know, a little rowboat from China or over from Europe. They came in from the southern border of the United States and made their way up to Canada. And so the southern border is clearly the place where they're going to put the most amount of attention to deal with the problem. But the other piece of this is also making sure that we are being responsible, good partners, understanding who's coming into our country. So part of the problem has been, and you've seen Canada move to put in visa restrictions for people coming from Mexico, is people who are coming here and then using us as an easier place to penetrate the U.S. border. And so I think it's fair to say we want to focus on a perimeter approach. If there's a bad guy coming into the United States, that's bad for Canada. If there's a bad guy coming into Canada, that's also bad for the United States. So let's work on our shared perimeter. Let's have some good continental security and be good partners with the USA, because you know, there's no way to properly defend this border the way that it would need to be defended normally, because it's just too big. There's no fence along most of this border. It has to be done through a perimeter approach and making sure that we're coordinating our efforts with the United States.
Mayor Diodati, the federal government comes to you and asks, what's your best advice for dealing with this incoming administration, and what issues matter most to you? What do you tell them?
It always comes down to relationships. I would definitely be knocking on David McNaughton's door, former Canadian ambassador to the United States, who worked there during the Trump administration. I know he's got some great relationships in Washington, and we're going to have to go to these people with strong relations that can have these sensible conversations. And I agree with what Mayor Dilkens said. We need to take a perimeter approach, a North America approach, and look at the outer border, not necessarily just between the two countries. So it's going to be boiling down to relationships.
Mayor Brown, final word to you, similar question. If you were to identify the top priority that you would be advocating for the federal government to move forward on when it comes to this relationship as Donald Trump becomes the 47th president, what would you tell them?
I think my worry would be the American first approach. And so I think the Trump administration is going to be chasing investment that has left the U.S. And so there are significant industry that are American companies that are in Canada, in all our communities, that create employment and prosperity. And frankly, there's Canadian companies that operate in the U.S. And so if there's an effort to take back those investments in those plants, that's a tremendous risk for Canada. And I think that's what we need to have our sort of eye on the ball to make sure we protect those jobs that are in Canada.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. I appreciate all three of you making the time for the discussion tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vassy.